Welcome to Learning in Action at the International School of Brussels. My name is Christopher Strohmeyer. I'm ISB class of 2010, and I'm joined here by an ISB 12th grader, Victor May. It's really exciting to be here today, back at ISB in some way, although virtually, as we're getting used to so often these days. Today, Victor and I are going to talk about a topic that's familiar to all of us, but not often spoken about: fear and the anxiety it causes. It's something we all feel at different moments of our lives, and something that's particularly relevant in these unpredictable COVID times. With the conversation today, what we're hoping to do is bridge some gaps of understanding between two people at slightly different stages of our lives. And I'm excited to find out what is similar, what is different, and what we can learn from each other. So, hi, Victor. It's really great to be here with you today.
Yeah. Hi, Christopher. It's really great to be here today.
Yeah. So let's just kind of quickly do introductions. So Victor, you wanna get us going? Tell us a little bit about your story, what you're involved in at ISB, etc.
Yeah, no problem. So as Christopher said, my name is Victor. I'm currently a senior here at ISB, taking exams in about 4 months. I've been at ISB for now 7 years. Came here in 6th grade. And I've really enjoyed my time here. I've made some great friends here. Obviously, with COVID this year, it's been a bit more complicated. But I find ISB has managed the situation to the best as they could. So I really enjoyed my time here. In the past 7 years at ISB, I've been mainly included in sports as my extracurriculars. I've been doing basketball, American football, and lacrosse. Which I find has been a very nice opportunity for me here as well.
Yeah, no, sports at ISB are incredible. Yeah, one of the best parts of the experience. Thanks, Victor. Yeah, so just quickly about myself. As I mentioned, my name is Christopher Strohmeyer. I was born in the US, but like Victor, had a kind of a global upbringing, living all over the place in Europe and in Latin America. I consider myself a mixture of German, Argentine, and American. I showed up at ISB in 6th grade back in 2003. I feel old now already, and did 7 years at ISB through 12th grade. Really some of the happiest years of my life. Just really an incredible place. Miss it so much still. And yeah, after ISB, studied at Georgetown University in the United States. Worked in management consulting and strategy consulting for 2 years after that in the United States and in Mexico, kept kind of globetrotting, and then moved to Argentina, where I worked in government. Argentina is a country very dear to me and what I consider my home, and worked in government for 4 years in Argentina, and recently, just 6 months ago, started studying again and doing a master's in business administration at Stanford University. So you find me in California today. Anyway, okay, so let's get started with the conversation. Kind of the first topic I wanna kind of talk about, Victor, if it makes sense for you, is where we are kind of right now in our lives. What in our daily lives today is worrying us, causes us anxiety when we wake up in the morning, and why is that happening? So what's it like for you?
Well, obviously as a student, senior student who's taking IB, the obvious fear is just, every student's fear: grades, exams, kind of, what am I going to do next year? Where am I going to be? And these are the kind of things that, they don't keep you up at night, but they can either cripple you or they can push you to study harder, to work better. But I find that this year has been particularly challenging because, you don't have that personal approach that you usually do, maybe with the teachers or your friends. I don't know, maybe you started studying 6 months ago. Obviously, coming to a new place maybe in this time can be really challenging. I was wondering how you felt about that as well.
Actually, yeah, it's interesting what you're saying. Yeah, I haven't had to, study, worry about exams in 6 years. After graduating from my undergraduate at Georgetown, and all of a sudden to be here and have those kinds of deadlines again, have to study for an exam, it was an interesting kind of weird, disconcerting thing. What's good for me about kind of the exams and stuff is that I'm able to now put it into more context in some way, and I think that's something interesting about fears. That when you're a high school student, or when I was, getting good grades is the only measuring stick really out there, right? You have to get good grades, and that's necessary. I remember the IB exams to get into a good university, and it seems like the important thing for the rest of our lives, and in some way it is. The good thing kind of now, already kind of at age 29, I've worked in the real world. I know that, even if I get a bad grade on one or two exams, that's not going to make the huge difference. But having said that, I think ISB raised the bar for me, and I think some of my friends here would say that I even study too much. But it's interesting. It's interesting what you say about that. You mentioned quickly, and I wanted to talk about. So what's how has kind of COVID impacted all of this? Do you feel that it makes it more difficult? You mentioned that it's more difficult when there's no in-person interaction. I think that's interesting too.
Yeah, and I mean, this is not necessarily so much a problem this year. This year, ISB has made it possible to have in-person learning. But definitely towards the end of last year, I often found myself kind of getting distracted in class. And then the end of the year came and we had these kind of online exams, and I realized I'm not where I want to be at this point. And so that was a big worry for me as well. And I think many students can relate to what I'm saying, is that you just don't have that kind of the same motivation because you don't see the results as much as you do in person, and I find that really, really challenging as a student. So
that's a good way to put it. Actually, I never thought of it that way. So no, you're right. When we're in a classroom, we're getting that direct feedback from our teachers, from our classmates, etc. And it is way too easy to get distracted on Zoom. I think we all suffer that. You mentioned something before as well that kept me thinking. You said, sometimes, worrying about these things is a good thing because it makes you study harder, it makes you work harder. So I had a boss in Argentina, someone I admire greatly, and who's a close friend of mine as well, who once told me in Spanish, la ansiedad es un valor. Anxiety is a good thing. We should value anxiety, which, is weird because everyone thinks of kind of anxiety being a bad thing. But what he was saying is, just a little bit of anxiety is what pushes us forward, kind of in the day-to-day. What actually, we need deadlines to get things done. At least I do. And a little bit of anxiety is what pushes us to kind of like do more, be better, learn from ourselves, learn from mistakes, etc. But at the same time, at least for me, I hate it when I'm anxious. I hate waking up in the morning anxious about something. So I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, and I think I can bring like kind of a personal kind of story into this. Is when I'm anxious, I actually often work much less, like in the sense I cannot think as much when I'm anxious. And so I think anxiety in the sense that you want to get something is good, but anxious in like stress or overthinking can also actually prevent you from making progress. So I definitely can relate to that. I mean, for me, that's most present when I took exams in this past week, mock exams for IB. I realized to what extent what I was practicing and what I did in the exams was so different, so completely, radically different because of this fear of not getting what I want. So I think, obviously anxiety can help push us forward, but we can't let it bring us down either. And relating to what you were saying before about, grades being the most important part of my life right now, my parents actually often tell me when I'm getting anxious, there is a life after school, right? There's always going to be something else. And I guess that's the quote that really just keeps me going, right? Even if you mess up, it's okay. You learn from it. And I guess that's also a key part of like relaxing myself and keeping my fear to what is rational and not what is irrational.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I'm learning a lot here. I think that's right. I think it's exactly as you say. So one thing, and I want to kind of talk about this a bit more, because I think this is the core of it. Is so one way of dealing with our fears is kind of exactly to put things in perspective, to realize that what we think is a negative outcome of something isn't as bad or isn't as important as we think it is, right? What else? Like, what else do you do? Kind of also kind of practically in the day to day, when all of a sudden you feel anxious about an exam, about something else, about a conversation with a friend. Like, well, what helps you? You know, what are those day to day things, either mentally or even activities that kind of help you get through it?
That's an interesting question, because it's really difficult. You have different kinds of environments, right? And you have different responses to it. Like, when I played basketball, I remember before games, I used to be really scared of, not doing what I wanted to do or messing up, and in that kind of context, I guess what I did to push myself to do better, to release that fear, is just to visualize myself doing what I want. And so I guess kind of the imagining, visualizing, and then just creating what you want. And then I think reflection also is a big part of reducing fear, at least in the future, because you may fail, and then you can't just say, okay, I failed, I'll move on to something else. You have to say, why did I fail? What can I do to not fail next time? And I think that's part of removing fear, is to learn from what you feared, and then kind of destroy that fear as part of it as well.
Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, no, and as I think kind of back in my life and the moments where I felt kind of more fear about the future, or etc. It's always been when I've looked back, it's been those moments where I've also learned the most. And sometimes it's because there's been a concrete failure and I didn't get something I wanted. But sometimes even looking back and saying, why was I worried about that? Look how well it all worked itself out. You make me think of something, and as I think of kind of moments that have given me the most kind of the most anxiety or fear in my life, is when I've had to make kind of big decisions. You should almost enjoy this moment, so because the bad thing about kind of having school seem like everything there is out there, or the grades being so important, is that one test can seem like an insurmountable challenge, one IB exam, and I know how important IB exams are to get into university and the system that's set up with them, etc. But the good thing is that at least it's pretty clear where to go. I found it much harder actually, or where to go, what to do, where to focus on. I found it much harder as life has kind of gone on, when that wasn't so clear to me anymore. When in the last year of uni, when I had to decide what's my first job going to be, or even then when I was in a job and I wasn't very happy in my job, was kind of starting to get bored, and I had 5 different options of where to go next. And do I move to Argentina and take a huge pay cut but follow my dreams, or do I continue working in the United States and do the path that everyone is used to doing, etc. What university do I go to? Do I go back to university and do graduate school? Those are all options that all of a sudden have costs as well, and the choice you choose has a huge impact on the rest of your life. And those decisions have often caused me a lot of anxiety. But as I think back on them, I also realize, to be honest, sometimes there's no wrong decisions. So it's just to embrace that and kind of go with your gut. But I've learned about decision making. I'm still really bad at it, but I've learned about decision making in each one.
Yeah, and I guess kind of related to that is kind of this fear of regretting something, which I think every student has. It's like, you don't want to have regrets at the end of the day, and the only way to do that is really just to push yourself to do the best. But even at that point, there's so many choices, as you said, like, what if this university isn't the one that I'm going to develop my full potential at? And I think that's what every student is asking themselves when they're applying. It's like, what if I'm making a mistake? And I guess maybe I'd like to hear your experience on this. Did you ever feel when you went to university that you didn't belong there, that you could have gone somewhere else and done a much better job, much better path for you personally?
Wow, what a great question. What a great question. So when I first went to university, I at least back in my days at ISB, it was about a third of students went to the US, mostly the Americans, a third went to the UK, and a third went to the rest of the world. The UK normally grabbed most of the Europeans and kind of the mixed bag of kind of really international students, right? Most of my friends were going to the UK. I chose to go to the US because I wanted, in part, to kind of really go back to the country that I was born in, that I'd only spent 2 years of my life in until then, and discover how I felt in that country. I had no idea. And I'd be honest with you, the first 6 months in particular, but even the first year, were difficult. They were difficult because I wasn't sure. I came from this incredible place that was ISB, that was Brussels, that was so incredibly international, that everybody had a similar kind of international open experience to me, where we had a lot of freedoms, if I may. You can go out into town by the time at 18, and it's no problem to go to the US, where everything was much more regimented, where the drinking age was 21, which I thought was an infringement of my rights back at that time. And a lot of things culturally, this is just one example, but a lot of things culturally just felt weird, and it took me a while to realize I was feeling culture shock. Even though I had grown up around so many people, so many different. I thought being at ISB, I can get used to any culture. But what I realized in reality is, no, I got used to the ISB culture, which is a really incredible, special thing that I'm so happy I was a part of. But that's not the same part of that's not the same thing as then the US culture. So the first 6 months, first year were actually really difficult. I asked myself, am I at the right place? Am I happy here? And what I did is I digged in the only thing I knew how to dig into, which is studying more, right? Which can then mean less sleep and can just make you more miserable, and one thing can lead to the next. The good thing is that after 6 months, or after a year, things calm down. And I think that's another huge lesson is, just because we feel one way one day, doesn't mean that's going to be continuous. And as long as we keep perspective, we keep the optimism into the future, it goes away. And I ended up loving Georgetown. It was my place to be. It was as international as a US university could be. I made some incredible friends. It opened my world. It's a Jesuit university, so I found real depth speaking with a lot of the Jesuits, some were my professors, and I really flourished there. But it took some time. It really took some time, and that tends to happen in these big life transitions. So it's a great question you ask. It's a great question you ask, and maybe.
I mean, I can definitely relate to what you're saying. When I lived in the U.S., coming from a European background, it's definitely a different culture there. It's incomparable to European culture, and often you kind of feel not necessarily left out, but you can't really relate to how other people are acting or what they're saying. So I definitely understand how you felt there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. It's and you make me even think about my choice. So my passion is in public service, in politics, in government, and even though that's my passion, I chose to come to a business school, which is Stanford, which is a broad experience. It's a management, it's a leadership experience. But I sort of sit in class, and I'm learning about how one single company is doing, whether this company is making money or that company is making money. And I wonder, is this really what I want to be studying? This is not how I view the world. I like society-wide issues. And that's what caused me anxiety. Am I at the right place? Am I spending 2 years of my life? Am I spending this money to be here at this university? But I know that's also just an experience of being here for 6 months. And I know from my previous experiences, and that's how we learn from previous experiences, that 6 months from now, I'm going to make this my own, and I know I'm going to have gotten a lot of value out of it. Also, simply because it's not. I'm around people that think about differently than I do, that think about different things, and I'm not in kind of the environment that I'm always most comfortable in. So you can take. It's interesting. You can take a lot of different. There's so many different paths, and I think you notice it even more as you go forward that it takes us in different ways and makes us ask so many different questions. But that's the beauty of life. We haven't. It's interesting. We haven't talked about COVID at all. We've had this whole conversation as if, which is a lesson on its own, right? That, life isn't perfect in non-COVID times either. And we worry about things.
Yeah.
But I want to talk a little bit about COVID because I think it's interesting. How has, let's go back to last March, right? Almost a year ago now. When you were an 11th grader, I don't know the details, but I imagine ISB from one day to the next just shut down. What was the feeling? What was it like?
It's really interesting because it was quite devastating for me last year because essentially I remember it was on a Monday and I was going home and I was going to give a math lesson to a younger student because I did that on a regular basis. And all of a sudden we just received this email, oh, the school's going to be closed until spring break and then we'll see from there. And everybody just assumed, 2 weeks off of school, great, fun. And then we just never went back.
When did that chip fall? When did it go from feeling like a snow day, where you're not at school for 2 weeks and everyone's having a ton of fun, to realizing, I want to be back at school?
I'd say towards the beginning of May, right? So right after spring break, okay, take another week, and then it starts to hit you. Okay, this is going to be longer than expected. And it was particularly hard for me to accept because, as I mentioned before, I often played sports at ISB. We had been training hard all season long for basketball, and our ISSTs were 1 week after that. So obviously that's something which devastated me. And to relate that to kind of fear and regret, ISB's sports is something that is uncommon, and that maybe, I probably will never play on such a high level team for the rest of my life. And looking back, maybe I didn't, what if I could have done more? What if I could have played better? What if I could have maybe even just enjoyed it more? And those are the kinds of questions you ask yourself, but at the same time, you have to realize that you just experienced some of the best times of your life, but at the same time, you've got to create new experiences. And so I think also part of that fear is that, not letting fear drag you back, not letting regrets drag you back, and just look forward, create new experiences for yourself as well, is what I learned from that.
Yeah, wow. It's very interesting what you're saying. And yeah, you're right. The sports, so I was definitely not as good at sports as you. I don't know if Coach Kazin is still at ISB. He can vouch for that. He nicely led me on to the varsity soccer. We call it football. The right name. Real football team every year. But I definitely dragged the quality of that team down. And so definitely wasn't as good at sports as you, but it was one of my favorite ISB experiences, memories. I remember getting injured once before an ISST, not being able to go and feeling as you did, like, I'm never going to have this back. And I knew for sure I wasn't going to be able to compete in uni. It might be different for you. But I thought that was going to be the end of it. And the end of my kind of sport experience. And you kind of do feel that regret. You feel that loss. And that's what COVID and what you just said makes me think about. You talked about regret. What I realized in COVID, and I think back to March. So March last year, I was working, but I was really, really excited to go back to school, to Stanford. I'm engaged to my girlfriend of more than 7 years, Lucia, and we were planning our wedding. And then COVID hit, right? And all of a sudden, you know, it was obvious that my Stanford experience wasn't going to be like I thought it was. You know, the school was already saying we're not sure it's going to be in person. A bunch of the students I was really excited to meet here started deferring and decided weren't going to be part of my class. We had to punt on our wedding. We still don't know when our wedding is, and I started feeling this. What I realized is I started feeling the sense of loss. You know, a lot of our happiness, or at least my happiness, is derived also from our expectations for what's coming in the future. You know, the things we get excited about, and all of a sudden, all those things started getting worse. Right? Started not being the experiences we hoped. We had to start changing plans, and that had a big impact on me for a while. And it only changed when I just changed my expectations. As you kind of said, you know, when I said, okay, no, this is not, my expectations can't be what they were 2 weeks ago. The world has changed. The world has changed, and it's changed, and it's different. So I can't compare my university experience, my graduate school experience now to what it would have been in person. I have to compare it to what it would be like to be working right now. Trust me, studying is more fun than working. And be convinced that, you know, we'll do the wedding eventually, and it's going to be an even better wedding because of all the kind of pent up excitement for it. So the kind of leveling those expectations, and as you said, creating new experiences and understanding that is so important, because if we just, you know, so I think it's important to just set high expectations for ourselves, back to kind of our anxiety conversation at the beginning. Kind of be ambitious in that way, but at the same time we also have to change the expectations when we know they're dragging us down. So.
Yeah, you talked a bit about your work experience, and I guess that's after university one of the biggest fears, especially now with COVID. I know I have one of my siblings now looking for a job, and with COVID it's quite difficult. How do you approach it? What kind of mentality do you set out for yourself, maybe in your last year of university, or, you know, maybe a bit after that? Because for a student, I think that's one of also the biggest steps, the biggest fears is, am I going to find a job? And that is amplified by COVID now. So I was wondering what's your take on that?
Yeah, no, a great question, and let me give you a little bit more kind of perspective here. I think you say now, yeah, am I going to find a job? Let me promise you, when you're in your last year of university, that's going to be probably less of an issue. It's going to be more, am I going to find the right job? I'm going to find a job that people think is a good job. You'll see, you know, just like, you know, people talk about better universities, worse universities, it's all kind of a social construct that happens in the workplace too. And you start even competing with your peers about, you know, what job each person gets. And so it becomes an even bigger thing in some way, or to phrase it a different way also, you know, am I getting the job I'm going to be good at, or the job I actually want to do, a job I'm going to be happy in if I start this career in 20 years, you know, all those questions come up. And it's a great question you ask. You know, I think I've gotten great advice around this on many instances of my life. And I'd say the following. I'd say three things, if I can just kind of pontificate for a second and give advice. First is, you know, always don't be afraid of a job and not being able to do it. So always push yourself. As in, don't be afraid, I'm not going to be able to do that job. That has never, at least in my experience, been a problem. And as you said earlier, if it becomes a problem, then you learn from it. Maybe it's a failure, and we can fail, and that we will have learned from it. So the first thing is to just, you know, being able to do the job should never, you know, if someone is saying, you know, you should interview for this position, or this is a job you can do, go for it. You know, as my brother likes to say, you know, you fake it till you make it. As in, you just keep going and grinding, and eventually you figure it out, right? Some way similar to sports, you just train and train and train, and eventually you're better than the other person. So that first. Second, I'm a big believer of following your passions, of really saying, okay, when a job comes up, I'm saying, you know, does this job excite me? And following the jobs that really create that excitement. When you see that listing, when you see that person that you'd work with, and say, oh, this is fun, this is exciting. I think being happy and being excited and passionate about a job is so important, because every job ends up being a drag. And then the last thing, I think this is super important for particularly for you, and it was particularly important for me. I got this advice from a professor of mine my last year in uni, as you say. He said, "Be risk acceptant." You know, human beings, we are wired to be risk averse. We are wired to look at the problems and things, to hedge our bets, to make sure that that we don't fail, that the basic things work, etc. And he said, no, take risks, in particular in your 20s, even beginning of your 30s. I think we've been given so much, even just our ISB education.
Mm-hmm.
If something goes wrong, if we went down the wrong path, we have so many chances later to rectify it. And a career of 50, 60 years. So we're much more likely to be happier long term if we do things early that seem riskier, that seem a little bit off the beaten path, that isn't what's obvious, because in some way we're following a passion. And I took that advice, not necessarily my first job out of uni, but mostly my second, which was in Argentina in government. I went somewhere that no one else wanted to work in, basically, and in a job that everyone said, why would you go into government? And that's not a prestigious career. And I found my purpose, my passion there. So I think taking those risks in particular, because we're lucky, right? We've gotten the best of educations, and not everybody is as lucky as we are. So I think we're able to take those risks that other people aren't. So hey, Victor, I think we need to actually close there. We've gone much longer than the time we were allotted for this podcast. Any closing thoughts?
No, I just thought it was really interesting, the risk and kind of, I guess, connotations with like embracing fear, if it's worth it, if it's what you want to do. So yeah, I thought that was great. Thank you.
No, this was let me say, this was I don't think I was even half as mature and as intelligent, as well spoken, as eloquent as Victor when I was in 12th grade, and I've never met anybody like Victor. So this conversation has been just an absolute pleasure for me. So it's been really nice to meet you and talk about this. I've learned so much.
Thank you. You too.
Cool. Well, to everyone in the ISB community, a big hello. Keep doing the great work. Keep learning. Keep teaching. What a special place.